Jordan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
Keep hearing stories. I'm like, dude, I gotta get you in front of me.
Yeah.
But first, I got to hear about your Burning Man experience. Is that the first time you've been to Burning Man?
Second time.
Second time?
Yep.
When was the first time?
We went, the last one they officially had in 2019.
Okay. Awesome. Tell me about Burning Man. I've trained a lot of people when I was young, like 25, trained a lot of tech burners. They would tell me stories. So it's been a while. It's been like 10 plus years. Tell me about that.
Where does one begin? It is awesome and awful is one way I'll describe it.
Really?
Yeah. It's very much a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
I think there's this glamorized idea of it, how it's the most amazing experience ever. And that's true. I want to be clear. It's fucking incredible. It's otherworldly, truly.
Yeah.
And like you work for it. It's not all love and light, rainbows and butterflies, and you just show up and you have this amazing festival experience. I'm using quotes on it because they don't like it when you call it a festival, burners.
Yeah.
That's the best thing to compare it to, but it really is much more than just a weekend festival. It's not your Coachella or EDC. The pilgrimage concept is part of what, if not the foundational thing that makes it so special, because you got to work for it. And when you commit to going, it's an initiation, like truly. It's out in the middle of nowhere. There's 70 to 80,000 plus people that create a thriving city out of nothing.
Wow.
The rest of the essentially 50 weeks of the year, it is the desert. It is not a place that nature wants you to live.
Yeah, no plumbing, no bathrooms, no anything.
No, you bring all of that. And the Burning Man organization provides very little. Essentially the permits, the legal ability to do it, some porta pots, and the only thing you can buy there is ice and coffee. So the center camp provides that. That's the only commerce where there's an exchange of money. Outside of that, it's the gifting economy. This is a thing that a lot of people, they think bartering, like trading. No. It's gifting economy. It's like you give without any expectation of reciprocity. So there's not that transactional nature and energy. It's just like fucking giving of overflow. Your cup runneth over, abundance, and you just give from that place of it feels good to give. Outside of that, my personal journey, so both years I drove our short bus. We have a short bus that we've been renovating for several years, and it feels like it's never ending.
Yeah.
Her name's Florence, aka Flo, or the Flowmobile. And so this time I drove by myself, because when we went last time, I guess it was 3 years ago now, we drove out there together, and she's raw. Like when I first got her, she was a full-on school bus that had all the original letters, coloring, seats. And so we put in quite a bit of work, but I'm somewhat handy, like more than probably your average person, but I'm not a handyman. I'm not a plumber. I'm not an electrician. I'm not a carpenter.
Yeah.
Everything I figure out, I just kind of figure out. So she's still quite raw in a lot of ways. She's 30 years old, so she's no young, sprightly lady.
Damn, you drive her from here all the way down?
Yes.
Wow.
So this year I drove by myself because I didn't want to subject Lex to that. I was like, I'm a fly baby girl there, let her have a little bit more bougie of an experience.
Yeah.
And so it's, a solid 30 plus hours, 3 to 4 day drive there and back. I went just about a week early this year to also help build our camp. So we stayed at like a pretty highly produced big camp. They call it a sound camp with like 250 people. So I got there early to help build this camp, which was, again, highly produced. It has, running water, showers, a full thriving meal kitchen plan, multiple big structures. And I love that. That's like so fulfilling to me. I have throughout my life found myself producing a lot of events, and I have a knack for it. I really enjoy it, even though it's incredibly challenging. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, you got to haul everything in. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're hauling everything in. My bus is packed to the brim with my personal stuff too, and it's hot out there, man.
Yeah.
In the middle of the summer, in the middle of the desert. It's this year, essentially every few years, roughly, there's a particularly challenging weather year, and this was one of those years where it got over 120 multiple times throughout the experience. Brutal, man. And it's also known for dust storms, where out of nowhere, there's no warning, wind will pick up and dust like just creates an atmosphere where you can't see 5 to 10 plus feet in front of you. And there was a lot of that this year, which when we went a few years ago, there was like one the entire time. And the weather was hot, but not that hot. So that just enhanced the challenge and the righteous reward of it for sure. But outside of those things, man, yeah, anything you can and can't imagine is available to you there. It is like the creativity, the inspiration, the artistry, the sexiness. It is, I mean, unlike anything that exists, like truly. And yeah, it's very much sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and peace, love, and soul. It's that polarity of all of that. And so
that's rad. What did you bring down there for your gifting?
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny because a lot of people, especially if you've never been, even people that have been, there's a lot of, oh man, I got to make sure I bring something that's a really cool, good, thoughtful gift. And I think that's beautiful. And I think there's something to be said about trusting that you don't necessarily have to spend all that much time and effort and certainly money to think of this really awesome, perfect gift. If that feels authentic to you and something really cool wants to come through and you're inspired to do that, awesome. That's beautiful. I know a lot of people that do that. The first year we kind of did that, and we got all of these towels from Costco, just like the kind of white throwaway towels that you might use in like a garage or something like that. And we put them in a backpack, a cooler backpack with ice, and we put essential oil on them. And we were like, man, they're gonna be so great. Like, it's hot out there. People are dirty. They're gonna have like this nice eucalyptus spritzer. You'll be able to wipe themselves down. We didn't even end up using them. Like we gave them to a few people, but it just didn't unfold the way we anticipated. And that's a big theme of the experience is immediacy, and just be present with what is here, what's real, what's authentic, what wants to happen. It's really radical practice in that regard. So, you know, I'm always mindful to bring more than what I know I need and bring things that would be delights to gift to others. So Bulletproof coffee, I'm a bona fide Bulletproof broski. I used to work with the brand for several years. And so, you know, I drink Bulletproof coffee every day, and I'm a big fan of the brand and the product. So I always bring extras of that, make coffee for people. We'll hand out cold brews, you know, protein shakes with like really high quality organic grass-fed whey or like organ meats. I always bring tons of supplements. So my biohacking side really gives in that experience for sure. And then just other things organically come up. They're like, oh yeah, this is a gift that I want to give. And it might not even be a physical thing. That's another thing there is like physical things, while they can be great, it's very much you bring it in, you pack it in, pack it out. So any trash you have, they're not like public trash cans. You got to take care of that shit your damn self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has going to these experiences shaped your mind and the way you live when you've come back?
It's a great question. So there's a couple pieces to it. One, and Lex and I had a really, I'll say beautiful realization coming back this time around, I think a lot of people go there with community in mind, and rightly so. Like, community is beautiful there. And there's this whole notion of welcome home. Like when you arrive, the greeters will say welcome home. And when you see and meet people, that's a common mantra of sorts. People say welcome home. And we both had this recognition, no, this isn't really home for us. We actually, home is, you know, where the heart is, I've heard it said. And we have a really strong home here in Austin, and not necessarily the physical place of Austin. I love Austin, but like our community feels like home. Our chosen family, we feel really dialed in with that and just feel so all in and good about it. So for us going there, it's much more the magic that is available and omnipresent, and the creativity. So how that influences my life when I come back, I feel a lot more a propensity to be bold, to take courageous, inspired action on a more consistent basis, because there it's so, the environment just encourages the shit out of that. And it welcomes it. It's the opportunities at every corner to do something really, again, courageous and radical and bold. And so when I come back, I definitely bring a whole nother level of that with me. That's one of the biggest takeaways. And just pushing my edges in general. There's certainly a sensuality, sexuality, openness component, and not even the overt, like, going to the Orgy Dome, for example, or things like that. Those are great. I haven't participated in that specifically, but we have done a play party workshop there. It's a sensuality workshop that's really beautiful that actually our camp puts on. And so I feel a little bit more, I'll say open, but more so I feel inspired sensually and sexually. There's just this feeling in the air where I'm turned on. That's the best way to put it, actually. I feel turned on for life. Just this like gratitude and zeal for life where I'm like, I'm fucking turned on. And it's like my...
Yeah, erotic energy is life energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel that. I bring back a lot of that when I come back.
That's oh man. I've always teetered on whether I should go or not. Is it good to find a camp to go with, or can you go solo-ish?
You definitely can.
Yeah.
I would recommend a camp for your first time.
Yeah.
Going solo, unless, if you're pretty self-sufficient, maybe you're like an outdoor person and camper, then you could be fine. But I also think that just having people that have done it before, because there's so many things you can't anticipate, even if you read all the blogs and really prepare. And it's just like having a home base and like a squad that is your safe space, I think is really valuable.
It's smart. And I want to touch on community, because that's such a big piece, I think, especially after the pandemic. More and more you see people talking about the importance of building community. I've even seen it in older people being isolated and how it's affected their mental health.
Yeah.
How have you successfully built community for you and Lex?
It's a great question. I would definitely say it's something that it's a gift that I innately have, building community. And it's certainly a skill that I've cultivated. And I've been really fortunate to have kind of an eclectic upbringing where I grew up half Ohio, like small Midwest town, and half Southern California, like kind of Real Housewives of Orange County. Not that that was my lifestyle, but like with that influence.
Super interesting.
Very different worlds. And I also lived with many different relatives and even like friends' parents throughout childhood and adolescence and high school. And not all of it was like really beautiful. Obviously, you could imagine there's some challenges there, but it really molded me into like a chameleon of sorts where I can shapeshift, I can adapt. And there's certainly a shadow to that, right? Sometimes I've had the tendency to put on a mask or not fully be authentically myself because I want to fit in a certain way. And that's part of the journey and the learning experience.
Yeah.
And so I think I've developed this really unique ability to bridge worlds. So like my persona online is Conscious Bro. I'm wearing a cutoff t-shirt right now that says spiritual as hell.
Yeah. I love it.
And I think it's very polarizing in a sense. Some people really resonate with it. Others are like, who's this fucking douchebag? Lex would hate that I said douchebag, but I said it. That's my wife, Lex. And so, but above all of that, I think that there's a phrase I use sometimes is I'm the bridge between the esoteric and the generic. And so I think people that are in that sweet spot, which is a fairly unique space, it continues to expand, which I love in the world. But it's people that recognize it, they are really drawn to it. And that combined with my ability, and I'll say Lex and I, even as a couple, really have just really complementary gifts that express themselves in ways that attract. We live very radically authentically, and that really strongly attracts like-hearted people. I won't say like-minded necessarily. This is like a concept I really love.
What's the difference?
Yeah, so I'll give credit on this one where I first heard it. My good friend JP Sears, this shirt I'm wearing, actually he developed, funny enough.
Super rad.
He married Lex and I. He was our irreverent reverend officiant. He was wearing a Pope onesie, no less.
That's amazing.
It was really great. But I heard him say this several years ago, that he loves being in the presence and in connection with like-hearted versus like-minded people. And so said another way, like-minded, what that implies to me is we have similar beliefs. Like you and I, and from that mindset, you could say that we are conditionally connected because we're like-minded. That's how we stay connected based on conditions of like, if we have these similar mental agreements, whereas like-hearted is like, you can be a Democrat, I can be a Republican, or you can be black, I'm white, or whatever these conditional mental agreements and constructs are, they don't fucking matter. Like, not really. They're data points, they're realities, but at the core of it, they don't matter. Like heart is, what are our values like? Are we committed to being high integrity people? Do we value generosity and kindness and courage and all these kind of things? So that's what that means, essentially, to me at least. Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. I've never thought about it in that way. When did you decide to start getting into some of this esoteric stuff? Like, where on your own journey growing up did you start to dabble into this world?
Mm-hmm. So there's a few pivotal points as it goes in any hero's journey.
100%.
One is, I'm going to burp real quick.
Do it.
There it is. Yeah. I needed that one to exercise the demons. And on that note, I grew up with religious influences. Specifically, my grandparents were pastors of a charismatic Christian church called Powerhouse.
Charismatic?
Yes.
Wow.
So like the shit you see on TV, like Benny Hinn and like, I think it was Steve, what was this? Anyway, there's like funny movies on it and stuff like that. And so they were very much slain in the spirit. Like my grandpa, Papa, he would be up at the pulpit just preaching and being very expressive and laying his hands on people, and they would like fall over, kind of a thing, speaking in tongues. Like I know my grandma's tongue perfectly. My dad would be doing that in the shower too. So it was pretty like that Christian Renaissance revival kind of energy to it.
Got some juice.
Got some gusto.
Yeah.
And like my aunt would be doing interpretive dance to the rock band that's doing worship.
Wow.
I even played drums, like backup for the worship team a little bit. And it was very ironic in a sense, I guess you could say, because in the summers, I spent, my parents got divorced when I was young, when I was like 3. And so I was born into this world in California. Parents got divorced. My mom moves to Ohio, and she's like single mom, alcoholic, works in a bar. My house was where all the firsts happened. First time you drank booze, you smoked weed, you had sex, all those firsts, you huffed gas. That was the thing. All those firsts happened at my house.
Yeah.
But then summers I would spend with my dad in California, and the rest of my family was heavily in the church. And my dad is like still to this day a Christian evangelist. So he is like, his greatest purpose and mission is to share the gospel of Jesus Christ and ultimately to save people, to convert people to Christianity. He's still trying to convert me every day. No joke.
Really?
Every day he sends me a scripture. I talk to him almost every day. I love my dad. We have a great relationship. And so all that to say, I had those kind of very different influences growing up. And so once I got into college, and so I think that that's what opened me up to spirituality at first, was this, you could say, construct, this religion, which can be certainly dogma as well. And so as I started to sort of think outside of that box while still really honoring my spiritual heritage, I think that's just, I'm so grateful for that. Got to college, mind got blown in many ways, as it does. Like, what do you mean the Bible wasn't written by God? Humans wrote it? Oh, it was inspired by God. But wait a second, actual humans wrote it. That was me at 18 years old. Like it was so interesting to have the light bulb turn on. And the possibilities just became so much more interesting and infinite. And then the next big awakening, you could say, was being in a fraternity in college. So I'm a total frat boy through and through. If you haven't felt it already, you can take the boy out the frat, can't take the frat out the boy. And that defined my college experience.
Yeah.
I went to San Diego State, and there's stereotypes for a reason, obviously.
Yeah.
Plenty of shadow in that season, and tons of amazing learning experiences, leadership, running a business. Like we had a multi-6-figure a year business that we were running as 18 to 21-year-old kids, Damn. There's hazing. There's really gnarly rites of passage and initiation experiences that for the most part were really beautiful, very physical, very challenging. And again, there's shadow there as well. But overall, that camaraderie, that brotherhood, that self-sufficiency, putting my physical body and mental tenacity, just exposing it to really extreme scenarios, just built a lot of character and grit. And so that was another big turning point. And then the last major one, or maybe there's 2 more. One was Bulletproof, discovering Bulletproof. after college, I was trying to sort of figure out what's next, working a corporate marketing job, doing what I thought I was supposed to do, but not particularly fulfilled, kind of living an extension of college, had the quarter life crisis, so to speak, where everything's falling apart. My 6-year college sweetheart relationship's coming to an end. Mm-hmm. I'm in over my head, was trying to be like the alumni chapter advisor at my fraternity. They got kicked off campus. I almost got charged with like criminal stuff for knowing that hazing was going on. Like it was just more stress and anxiety than I've ever experienced in my life, even probably still to this day. It was just so much pressure and so many calls and conversations, couldn't eat or sleep like much over the course of a few weeks. And it was like, all right, God was showing me shit needs to change radically. You're not, following your personal legend. If anybody's familiar with the book, The Alchemist. And that was one of the early books I read on that kind of journey as well. In that time, found Bulletproof, started drinking Bulletproof coffee, found the blog website, the podcast. And it was early on. They only had a few employees at that time. And I made a funny 5-minute video of why they should hire me. And it was the first really kind of unique, creative expression that I had embarked upon as an adult. This was 10 years ago, roughly. So YouTube and that kind of stuff was still fairly early on in its journey, So it was like, and then I got hired and I was just like, holy shit, I can do things that I never thought I could do.
Yeah, that's rad.
Yeah. And then from there, that just exposed me to the world of personal development in like a really just amazing way that I'm so grateful for. I was the national educator there for several years. So I would bounce around the country going to all kinds of retreats, conferences, festivals where like biohacking, personal development, nutrition, peak performance were the themes. So then my world just exploded being exposed to all this. And then meeting now my current wife, Lex, definitely took everything to another level.
That's amazing. So you've been exposed to community within your family, both mom and dad, and as well as in a frat through creating brotherhood, it sounds like.
Definitely.
And you lead men's retreats.
I do.
And so with community, what are some tools or skills or ways people begin to look for building community in their life that are wanting the community?
I get this question a lot, actually. And there's a few really practical ways that I found to do that. One, certainly location is a significant factor. And I think it's disingenuous to bypass that. Like, oh, you can find your people anywhere, even if you're in a small town in Ohio, like where I grew up. And this kind of, right? Yeah. Like, it's not going to be the same as Austin or like another major city where just people, there's more opportunity, there's more things going on. More of those like-minded people and hearted will move there.
I wish I realized this sooner because I would get told this by therapists or whoever, like, you can be happy here, you can figure it out. No, fuck that.
Yeah.
Find the place where you like the vibe.
Exactly.
Then root and then begin this process, I think.
I so agree. And so I would say that that's the best, if that is accessible to you. That's why I got to be real. Not everybody can just fucking pick up and move, you know?
Yeah.
Especially if you're married, have kids, or there's just financial hardship. There's a lot of very real factors that I want to acknowledge. So not everybody can do that. But if you can, and give yourself some credit, the proverbial you that I'm talking to right now, we are capable than a lot more than we think sometimes. And moving, like where there's a will, there's a way is what I'm getting at here.
100%.
So that would be a big one. And then if that's not available immediately, then a place to certainly start is virtual communities. So, when I started more intentionally on this journey, I was bouncing around. I actually lived out of my car for a year with my pit bull in my early days of Bulletproof. And so I was kind of all over the place. So there wasn't super consistent in-person community that was the same. But I had pretty great virtual community. And I was going to, again, a lot of these conferences and retreats. So going to a place and starting from a like-minded place is a really good place to start, right? Because if you have similar interests, there's just going to be like an easy point of connection there. So whether that's like nutrition and fitness / biohacking or tech or crypto or whatever like is interesting to you, go to a conference. That's
a great idea.
It works. So I know Tim Ferriss a while back did a whole blog post about like hacking South by Southwest. He talks about similar concepts in there of just cool. Like leveraging the experience and networking, but doing it in like an authentic way that could potentially build community. So I think that's a really good one. I went to a few personal development retreats that really kicked that into overdrive for me, where I connected so deeply and so authentically and so quickly that it just started to catalyze so many other opportunities and connections in my life. And then there's, if nothing else, maybe again, that's not accessible to you. It's too expensive or whatever the hindrances may or may not actually be.
There's lots of virtual conferences now, though.
There's tons.
Yeah.
Now, they don't trump in person. Virtual will never be a substitute for in-person stuff.
For sure.
But for the in-between or for the getting started, it can be a great tool, a great asset. So virtual men's groups is something I run and I'm a part of, both as a practitioner, a student, a mastermind, equal, so to speak, all those ways. So yeah, maybe one last thing I'll say for now, and I don't know if this is still relevant, but this is something I used to do quite a bit, Facebook events.
Yeah.
I used to look at Facebook events pretty often and would go to like open free yoga classes on the beach or at a park. So there's lots of stuff out there.
That's good advice. And then segueing into men's groups, how and why did you decide to start to transition into that?
I would say it was heavily influenced by my fraternity experience. It was like wanting to recapture that magic, but in a way that fit this season of life for me and where I'm at, where I want to go. And so, another burp there.
What do you think in the frat are the qualities that are pro that you felt like were missing that you wanted to incorporate in other men's lives?
I think there's a layer of less ego, I guess would be a simple way to put it. They're in that, think about it. You got a bunch of 18 to 21-ish year olds who are pretending to be young adults, but they're really still kids. Most of us are on some level are on our own for the first time. And in a fraternity, at least in this setting, we were in a house with no rules other than the ones that we had, which, they're the responsible execs, of which I was one, that would like enforce rules and create some sort of structure and order.
Okay.
But at the same time, people are unruly. They're punching holes in walls. They're getting like hammered drunk. They're just doing stupid shit, getting into trouble. And so you're kind of trying to mitigate some of that. So there's an immaturity there. That ego and immaturity is like the thing that I wanted to, that's never going to go away for everyone always, right? But it's, and I think there's just a natural progression as you get older where that starts to hopefully minimize. And so I was definitely looking to recapture like the core elements formally of the fraternity I was in was friendship, justice, and learning.
Okay.
Which are beautiful. I love that, and those can be interpreted in so many different ways. But yeah, leveraging that and again, the ritual, the rite of passage, but in a way that felt more modern and more authentic to me. And so, that's what I took that as the foundation and kind of acknowledged the other shadowy parts that didn't have a place and really magnified those other pieces and then added a lot of the special sauce from the things I've learned throughout the years.
That's amazing. Justice. Talk about justice. What do you mean when you say justice was?
So there's probably the obvious on the surface is doing what's right. It's, you could say atoning for mistakes or at least owning them. But to me, I think an even deeper, greater expression that is sort of a catch-all is integrity. Because justice, like when I feel into that and I think about it, it feels a little external in the sense of like a judge is making a call based on an infraction that I did. And so it's a little outside of me, whereas integrity is an internal game. And so nowadays, I'm surrounding myself with guys who have the most like awe-inspiring, ruthless internal integrity, because external integrity is pretty obvious, right? If you're like just an outward dickhead, you're lying, you're cheating, you're just an asshole, then cool. Like that's not even in my world nowadays. I very rarely expose that. So when I am, like I play basketball, it's like probably my greatest passion. It's funny. I play in a men's rec league and I'm exposed to that. You can call it toxic masculinity, and it's a little confronting and jarring, but mostly it's kind of funny. I'm like, holy shit. Like Yeah, a little sad too, a little discouraging. But anyway, I digress.
No,
So integrity is like the expression of justice as far as I see it, and what like I'm wanting to bring in as men of super high integrity.
that's rad. Do you do just retreats, or you also have a weekly or monthly group meetup?
So
How do you work?
yeah, there's a few different things I'm up to. I have my what's typically an annual men's retreat happening actually next month here in Austin. And so I kind of hold down the men's side. Like Lex and I have a business together,
Yeah.
Sex and Love and Relationships, Sex and Love Co. is the name.
Yeah.
And I hold down the men's part. She holds down the women, and then we do couples together. We do couples together. It's kind of funny. And so
Is this the orgy temple? What is
exactly right. So roughly we'll do one of each of those a year, sometimes two, just depending on the year and how we're feeling. So a couples retreat, women's only, men's only. And then we generally have those coupled with a virtual experience before and or after the retreats.
Cool.
They're not completely 100% together. Like there's some people will go only to the retreat and not do the virtual part, or vice versa, but about 90% do both. And that's ideal. That's what makes the most sense. It's cool to have like right now I'm in the middle of my virtual men's group. I'm about halfway through it, and it'll culminate and end the week of the retreat. And then 90% of those guys are going to be at the retreat. So it's like we got to have this journey together, and then we get to really bring it home with this in-person, true, like deeply transformational experience, and just the climax of it all. We get to meet each other and celebrate. So that's generally what it looks like.
That's super rad. What are some of the like common men's issues or things brought up in your men's group?
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind is purpose, right? It's kind of the classic way of the superior man. Like, have you read that book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine so. And that's, if anybody's listening and hasn't, and is a man especially, that is a core foundational men's personal development read. It can get, a little woo-woo, but if you have an open heart and open mind, it's a gift that keeps on giving for me. Like I revisit it often. So a big part of what the author David Data talks about in that is purpose, and how important it is for men in particular to have purpose. And so that's a big part of it, is identifying purpose. And also it's really important for me to, in a sense, have a reality check around like purpose and career are not necessarily the same thing.
Totally.
If there is overlap, or if they're one and the same, holy shit, that's awesome. Like my buddy JP is a great example. His purpose and his career are fully in alignment, awesome. He gets paid handsomely to do the thing he's best at and feels most called to. A lot of people, that's just not available for whatever reason, and that's totally okay. So that's a distinction that I like to make, and
That's
like something I'll walk my guys through is, I don't subscribe to the notion of like follow your bliss, unabashedly, and everything else be damned. It's like, no, that can be immature, ungrounded, and feminine, actually, not masculine for a man to do that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one big thing that we'll go into.
How do you help men find their purpose?
So here's an example. On the last call, on each call, we do typically 1 to 3 notable little initiations together. And so on this last one, that was a big theme of the call, is what is your why? What's your purpose? And so literally everybody goes around and is on a timer for 1 to 2 minutes, and they share what their purpose is. And so starting there, where you're declaring this in front of everybody, and frankly, most of the guys don't really know. Like that's part of the reason that drew them to what I'm up to into this space, is because there's a lot of unknowns in their life. There's maybe lack of confidence, there's insecurities, all these kind of things. And typically if those things are strongly present, there's probably also a lack of clarity in purpose. And so that's the place to start, is to just riff about it a little bit. And have you ever even asked yourself that question and considered, what is my purpose? Do I have some clarity? Do I have no clarity? Is it very specific? Is it more general? Does it feel like it's unique to right now and will probably shift soon? And all those are fine, right? Like I have one guy who his purpose in this season is to be a really good man. And he talked about that a little bit, about how he wants to feel confident in becoming a husband and father. And he's not even in a relationship right now, but he recognizes that he doesn't feel like he's where he wants to be, needs to be, in order to be a capable man, to be a really dependable husband and a present, reliable father. And so right now in this season, that is his purpose, is to get to that place. And for other guys, it can be across the board. Like it might be like I also have them develop dharmic statements.
Okay.
So I'll just quickly share mine. And so this is their brome work for this week, as I call it, homework, but for bros, their brome work. I'm full of these fucking things.
These are great. This is a book in the making.
I've had other people say that, man. It feels like maybe it's time to start considering that a little bit.
I could feel it.
Yeah.
Just when you talk, I can feel it.
Thank you, man. Yeah. That feels fun.
Yeah.
So the dharmic statement, and I got this from a buddy of mine and put my own little kind of Jordan twist on it, is to inspire higher truths through radical authenticity and humor, and lead men and women through transformational in-person and virtual experiences. That's my dharmic statement. That's my purpose in this season. And it might shift. I developed the first part of that maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and then I've added and tweaked it slightly since then, and it still rings very true. At some point, that might completely change. And in this concept of the way of superior man, he recommends doing this practice like quarterly, ideally, or at least once or twice a year, where you get out in nature, and you're like kind of by yourself, you reduce the noise, and you sit with that question: what is my purpose? Yeah.
I 100% agree. I've always thought that, even just for myself. You just got to go somewhere, get an Airbnb, be by yourself, and you just got to be away from everything.
Yep.
And just sit and just reflect on everything. But I've never thought to the point of what is my purpose. So I'm going to apply that next time.
It's great.
So purpose is a common thing. What's another common thing that comes up?
Yeah, another common thing is, so I have like a list of about 30 agreements that we go through on the first call.
Yeah.
And one of them is ask for what you want. And then the follow-up that in parentheses is, and don't be attached to getting it.
Wow.
And so this is a practice also call it rejection therapy. So there's a really awesome TED Talk that this guy, I think his name is Yi Zhang, if I'm not mistaken. He did, I think, 100 days of rejection therapy, where he asked for some of the most ridiculous shit that makes no sense. And then he asked for a lot of real stuff. He just made it a practice and a habit to ask for everything that he wanted. And being genuine about it, but also being a little absurd and playful, and just letting that be the practice. Like, what would happen? How would I change? What would I receive if I just ask for it? Because there's a lot of people that are just afraid, myself included. I think everybody can relate to being afraid of asking for what you want.
For sure.
Feeling like a pest, feeling like you don't deserve it, wanting to just be a little bit more agreeable and keep the peace, those kinds of things. And so that's a big thing we'll do, is we have rejection therapy. So I encourage the guys to ask for one thing that feels really big and important, that it feels like an edge, like they're maybe even unsure if they're worthy of it. But it's coming from an authentic, grounded place, right? You're not going to go to your boss at your job and ask for $1 million raise. You might, not guys that are in my group, and like I don't think that's all that common. That's obviously an extreme example.
For sure.
That's kind of stupid. That's immature. That's not what we're going for here. But you might ask for a $10,000 raise. And I've heard this kind of rule of thumb where ask for something, or in money specifically, say I feel like I'm worthy of a $5,000 raise. Triple it. Like, play with that edge. Maybe that's not what you end up asking for, but go through that thought experiment. And so like another thing that this guy asked, he went to a Krispy Kreme and asked them to make the donuts out of the Olympic symbol. You have 3 donuts together, like interchanged, like a linked kind of fence thing or whatever. Yeah. And so I have my guys ask for one kind of ridiculous thing, like go to Starbucks and ask them, we'll just give you a free coffee, and sit with the discomfort of asking for that, and maybe they'll give it to you. It's happened many times, many times.
Yeah.
And then like once a week, do one of those, and then do one that like feels like an edge. That's like something you actually really want though. So yeah,
that's really big. In your men's groups, is there a practice that you are willing to share that you see really create a shift in men's lives?
Definitely. Certainly all these do, but like one that comes to mind when you ask that question is a practice called Love Thy Neighbor. So there's a lot of fun little biblical influences in my programs.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So what this looks like is on one of the calls, and they're actually doing this maybe not next week, but the week after. Oh, and I'm going to share a second one after this too, because there's an honorable mention that I got to get to, and it might even be better than this one I'm about to share. But so love thy neighbor. It's funny, the way this started when I first developed this idea, we would, at the beginning of the call, I would have them send a voice note or two to somebody they care about and just send them some love. And voice note or a video, not a text, right? Experience the emotion, the tone, like all those things that are really important and influence how someone receives something, like how you are expressing it and the heart you put into it. So that's how it started the first one or two times that I ran this program. And then it started to organically shift into something much more edgy. And this is what it is now. So now what we do is I still have them do that, but I have them do that on their own time. So that's like their Brone work outside of this call for that week is send 5 voice notes to like maybe your dad who you don't have a relationship of like sharing appreciation and love with him, right? Or like an uncle or a long lost friend or whatever. But the more radical twist on this that we now do live together, so you do it in front of everybody, which is just that like accountability buddy vibe, you know, in the moment is so powerful.
Yeah.
Like we just create this vortex that's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
What they do is have a clearing conversation. And so I make sure to provide a lot of context for this, and because I want to make sure that this is coming from a really mature, grounded place. I know I keep harping on this, but that's just so important to like cultivate and develop that skill and that knowing of when it is mature and grounded and when it's maybe a little self-serving and egoic and immature. And so what that can look like is like one example that comes to mind. One of the guys on the call had an uncle that they had a falling out with. It had to do with like fucking politics or something. I think that's happening to a lot of people nowadays, right? Sure. And he was just feeling, and so the way I frame it as I'm describing the practice is like, there's someone in your life, there's probably many people in your life that you feel like there's unfinished business. There's a clearing conversation that needs to happen and you've been avoiding it, or you've just like assumed that it's just over and it's just going to be what it is. But your higher self knows that's bullshit and is looking for reconciliation, is looking for congruence. You could say closure, although that word has a little bit of baggage I'm not super into. And so the reason why I really go into the context of describing this is because a common one that comes up that I mostly don't agree with and I discourage guys from doing is reaching out to a previous partner. Because that one can get dicey. And whether, even if someone is heart, they think it's really in the right place, and maybe it actually really is, and it's not self-serving, it's not them looking to get a little validation or like forgiveness. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but the problem potentially is they didn't ask for that. That previous partner, the practice is meant to serve the true greatest good. It's not to make you feel better and make me feel better. It's to serve the highest good with keeping that person's heart, like keeping it safe and keeping it like top of mind.
Yeah, like if I open this past relationship, am I going to cause a bunch of trauma?
Exactly.
Actually, even though it may make me feel better.
100%.
Like her new husband, their kids, like I'm about to create a bunch of chaos because I'm trying to resolve something in myself.
Absolutely.
So you got to really look at it from every angle.
Yeah. So I typically strongly discourage that. Every once in a while, it seems appropriate and the guy really stands for like, this feels right. And it's like, cool.
Okay, yeah.
And I also encourage guys to take radical extreme ownership. An amazing book by Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. Super recommend it. It's radical once again, but we're not going into this, 1-ish minute voice note because that's the creative constraint I like to give. It's like 1 minute, don't go into all these excuses or the details of the situation. That doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
You can potentially have a follow-up conversation where y'all really hash it out and just fully express yourselves. That could be perfectly appropriate. That's great. That's not what this is for. What this is for is to take complete ownership over what you want ultimately, not even necessarily what you did if you feel like you did anything wrong. Again, that's not what the point of this is, to like come to like connection and to like close that loop in a sense, energetically. And so, the example of the guy with the uncle, he just said, hey, and there's a voice note he's doing. It's so fun to watch this, man. It's wild. It's like, hey, I have you on my heart and mind. I know we like have had our differences and we kind of had this falling out over a conversation. I don't even really remember that much about it. And what I do feel in this moment is just desire to reconnect with you, or at the very least, just tell you I love you and I care about you and I miss you. That's it. Boom.
Wow.
How powerful is that? The guy on the other side of that receiving it, how can they not feel anything but like, oh, yes. And if they don't, that's okay, because we are coming from the heart of like truly wanting to resolve things and make the world a better place, if you want to be cheesy and cliche.
You're like building this bridge.
Exactly.
Of kind of like heart connection again. It's like, it's there if you want it.
Yeah.
It's like an invitation to begin to grow
Exactly.
that connection again.
And some guys don't get a response. And that happens. And that's part of in a sense, asking for what you want and not being attached to getting it.
But I imagine it feels good because you're like, I've opened myself and now it's up to God. It's up to whatever from that point forward.
Yep.
Yeah. That's incredible. And so when you met Lex, what was your relationship skills like?
That's a great question.
Were you just always a stud? Or was there some growing from past relationships to this relationship?
Yeah.
It seems like to run a business together and do all these things, you have to be able to communicate. You have to have a strong relationship. And if you're living very both authentically, that takes a very strong couple.
Yeah. Totally.
And their skills to having a strong relationship.
Yeah. And it probably seems very glamorous on the surface. And to be clear, it's quite beautiful. Like I wouldn't have it any other way. And it is challenging, but it's a righteous challenge.
Yeah.
So coming to when we met, I was in my own personal development journey and in the space working with Bulletproof at the time. And so, I was on that journey and I had kind of I've always fancied myself a present, capable, integrity-filled lover, generally speaking. Now, that being said, I definitely didn't always use my powers in the best way. I knew I developed a skill, I guess you could say early, about how to connect with women. And the next layer of stewardship was what was emerging when I met Lex. In particular, the handful of months before I met Lex and was exposed to her and went after her, it was very clear that God, the universe, was calling me into a higher expression of masculinity and of relational stewardship. And what I mean by that is I got really good at being radically honest and speaking my intentions and on the surface, certainly caring for a woman's heart and not leading them on. I had done plenty of that and had learned from that and was always iterating and getting better. But the kind of next big iteration and jump that was on the horizon for me was having more of an internal compass / intuitive knowing of what do I want? What is she might be saying this thing, but does that seem true to me? And it's not to invalidate, or not believe what she's saying, but it's more like tuning in under the surface and a whole nother level. And so to get a little bit more specific with it, I would find myself starting to get in relationship with women where I knew I was not going to take it any further than the physical and just the sort of casual passive connection. Previous version of myself, the wannabe conscious fuckboy, as I called him, I would say the truly authentic things, but I learned that, and I came up with this idea, and I've heard others have variations of it too, that anti-game is the best game.
Okay.
Right? So I would be very open with what I was thinking and feeling. If I felt nervous, I would express that I felt nervous to come meet you, or I'd say, and it was very refreshing for women, and understandably so. It's wow, he's being totally real. He's not putting on a front or playing a game. But the irony is, it's a game also, So I got really good at that game, and had a lot of fun with it. And I think it was mostly harmless / a good thing. Until it wasn't. Yeah. Until it was you know what? I feel I have this responsibility because I have this higher level of knowing and understanding and conscious awareness that if I'm starting to connect with a woman, and I was getting really good, and I still continue to develop the skill of knowing my fuck yes and my fuck no, I can usually tell my fuck no pretty quickly. The fuck yes can be a little more elusive. I'm trying to dial that one in more. But I, especially with women at this time, I was really good at knowing this is not my person. And where the incongruence was with me, and frankly, like the lack of really high internal integrity, was leading them on, even if I was telling them, look, I'm not interested in going anything beyond this. And they may say, cool, that's fine. Like, let's just have fun. But I could sense that there was, whether this story is true or not, like maybe he'll come around, or I'm just going to be in this because if that's all I can get, I want at least that as opposed to nothing. And so the few months leading up to Lex, I started to really painfully exercise that higher level of discernment where, there was one woman in particular, there was a couple, but there was one that I was so like physically, chemically attracted to that was just a bona fide babeski. And she was so sweet. She had just such a great heart and she was gorgeous. And the previous version of myself would have just been like, cool, let's have a fuck fest for a season, and great. And at the end of it, she'll probably be really hurt, and I don't want to be that anymore. I don't want to live in that space and from that place. And so this was the first time where, I felt this intensity around like this dissonance, you could say, of like, wow, I really want to sleep with this woman and just like say fuck it and go for it and just be in the hedonistic fun of it all. But my higher self was like, no, bro, this is a big pivotal moment. And I wouldn't have known it in that way necessarily in that moment, but I cut it off and I didn't sleep with her. And 2 months later is when I met Lex.
Nice.
And so that was pretty special.
I think this is a tale most men go through of, you want connection, you want relationship, the person's not for you, and yet you continue to see them. And the girl, I don't know, I feel like women have this ability to lie to themselves.
I can't help but agree with you.
It's like, I was talking to my buddy the other day, I was like, they know, but they pretend they don't know. So they lie to themselves, but they know. And so kind of what you're saying, I think it's like, and I got to that place too. It's like, what you're doing here.
Yeah.
We all know what's happening, and I'm the guy. It's my responsibility to not let this continue to go on.
Yep.
Right? Because she's gonna go with either way. Right. And I know if I keep going on, it's just not fair.
Yep. Totally agree.
So that's great. So when you met Lex, was there something different about her? Like inside of yourself you felt?
Yeah. So I've never had, I had hashtag commitment issues, like a lot of men, I guess, around. I think I was 29 when I first like encountered her. And I think there's a really wise rule of thumb that men at 30 is a good time where they're ready, willing, and able to be in like a long-term committed relationship. Not a hard and fast rule, but I think there's some wisdom to that notion.
Yeah, I tell girls all the time, if you're dating a 20-year-old guy, don't take it that serious.
Exception, not the rule.
There's going to come a point where he's going to go, I feel like I got to grow more and try some things. It's going to come.
Exactly. Yeah. It's pretty inevitable, I would say.
Yeah.
So I was right at that time where I just think energetically I was ready to grow up. I was ready to commit to someone. And I'd had right before that, in between this other woman I referenced, I had someone I really liked. And I played the game of not committing for like a month and just left her in this space of half in, half out. And I knew I was hurting her, like if I'm being honest with myself, but I didn't quite know. And then we didn't talk for like a couple weeks. And there was no explicit communication around why we weren't talking. I just was like feeling the intensity of a big commitment coming and I was afraid to make it. And so I just avoided.
Yeah.
And then I expected to come back to her and have my cake and eat it too kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And she had moved on. And that it was very confronting and it broke my heart and I was very public about it. So I was talking on Facebook about it, doing this is kind of the heyday of Facebook Lives. And simultaneously, Lex was sharing her experience of a heartbreak. And I had been creeping her from afar for about 6 months at that point online. I didn't know her personally, but we had many mutual friends. And then at this point, it just seemed very sort of divinely synchronistic that we were both going through this experience and sharing it publicly. And so it sounds kind of silly and cheesy, but I fucking knew, like essentially instantly. At the very least, I was like, I want to go after this woman in a way that feels very different than I've ever experienced before. And so I sent her a voice note on Facebook with a little freestyle rap to start it.
Nice.
I'd never done that before either. So I freestyle a little bit. That's one of the initiations I have my guys to go through, actually, is freestyle rap. It's very funny.
That's awesome.
It's great.
Yeah.
Brings up a lot of
You guys
sensations.
should make an album.
Oh, it'd be awful.
You get in a mic'd room and you each do a verse and just go around.
It's great. Yeah, that would be a
Okay, so
hot
you freestyle rap, send her a voice text.
And it was like 15 seconds of that. And then I just followed up with basically like, you seem awesome. I would love to get to know you. She was living in New Orleans. I was in San Diego. And a few weeks later, I flew out to meet her for the first time. And I documented this all on Facebook Live, which is really cool too, to look at that in hindsight.
Wow.
And that weekend, I told her I loved her. And I'm giving you the cliff notes. Like, I can really storify the beauty of it. But basically, I told her I loved her, and she reciprocated. And it was like, we've been together ever since. And, we got married last year. And it was just, the timing was right. We were both in this tender space where we were ready for something different. We found each other. And it was like, I don't need to fuck around. I can acknowledge whatever fears and insecurities and uncertainties are coming up. Sure. But the greater truth that supersedes all of it is like, this feels right. Like feet on the ground, head in the clouds kind of vibe. And so we just went all in from the very beginning and shared the scariest things right off the bat, the shames,
awesome.
the desires, all of it. And
you can only hope for something like that. That's
yep.
I think that's so true. I think for any men or women listening, when a guy wants something, he knows.
And he goes for it.
Yeah, there's a shift from like, oh, she's cute or she's hot or maybe. There's no maybe. There's like, fuck it. This thing might burn me down, but I'm fucking going for it. I don't give a shit.
Yep.
Right? And you'll know. And I think any women listening, you will know that he knows.
And if you don't know,
then
it's a no.
Then it's a no. Well, dude, we're already at an hour. This has been so fun.
It's been so fun.
Yeah, I'm going to have you back.
Would
Super
love to.
awesome. Thank you so much for being here. How do people find you, connect with you, join your group?
Instagram's going to be the best spot.
Okay.
@conscious.bro. All my things are there. The link tree with the links and all the things I got going on.
Sweet. Well, brother, appreciate it.
Yeah.